My husband and I have been married for 2 decades and have 2 teen kids. When our daughter was a toddler, I found out my husband was addicted to porn. This shattered me as I already felt less than for having a mom body and other reasons, but I stayed with him to try work it out. We went to couples and individual therapies. I told him that I wouldn't mention his addiction until he was ready to open up about it. After about 3 sessions, he decided that he was good. He was also mad about being in the hot seat, as the counselor was grilling him about why he doesn't do things around the house to help or want to be intimate with me. Fast forward to years later. I again found him watching porn at an alarming rate and confronted him about it. I told him I understood it wasn't easy, but I was here for him and wanted to help him get over this. Needless to say, he didn't. More years later, I just kind of accepted this, especially when he would get prickly when I would try to talk about it or gaslight me by saying it was my fault. But it was his problem and had nothing to do with me. Recently, a good friend passed away, and I rethought my life and realized I deserved to have a loving partner and not some bump on a log. So I began planning to divorce him and getting things ready, until I saw his porn that was AI-generated kitty porn. I was beyond disgusted. As I thought about it, he has an AI app that he uses to make his character portraits for our D&D, games and such. So now I'm thinking he's making and potentially distributing it through a website. I've seen him logging into. I'm done trying to help him and turning a blind eye to his porn usage. I'm so over his hypocrisy and idiocy. I'm still going to divorce him, but now I'm thinking I should also turn him in. All confrontation has made him hide or be angry at being caught. I know if I turn him in, this will burn the world around him. But I'm afraid of what could happen with our kids, or any other kids if he manages to get into another relationship. I moved out in a big city for college this year, and one day I decided to go out for a walk and call a friend. I was ranting about how tired I was from all the classes and project I had to do, when an old lady about 70 years old started walking next to me. I kept on talking for a while, before I heard the lady scoffing and mumbling under her breath about how lazy and entitled my generation is. I love my privacy, and even though I was having a phone call on the street, it angered me knowing she was listening in. That's when a heavenly idea hit me. I changed the subject of the talk. I went from telling my friend how good of a cousin he is, and how much I love him and how much I want to kiss him. He immediately got in on what I was doing and asked to be put on speaker. As I got to a crosswalk waiting for the green light, I looked at the lady that was just mortified and said to my friend, "Hey, I'ma put you on speaker 'cause my hand is tired." That was his sign to start going wild. What followed next was an extremely descriptive talk about all the sexual and BDSM things we should do when we finally meet up. It took about a minute before the old lady just tapped out, turned around, and walked away. I hope this will keep her from listening in on other phone calls.
I worked in a technical support team based at a client site late in the 90s. One of my colleagues was a bit of a dickhead. He didn't like to sharing information, left our company and went to work directly for the client. Then months later, I had an interview to also work for the client. I absolutely killed the interviews with whole day of various tasks with a dozen of people until it got to the final interview that this ex-colleague was also asking questions. I found out later that I didn't get the job because the ex-colleague had said, "I asked too many questions at work." Well, duh, I'm going to ask questions about some specific issues if I know you know the answer, instead of guessing. Anyway, some months later, everyone turned up at the site as normal, only to be called into a meeting with our boss, who must have flown in that morning, and the main client manager. Within 10 minutes, we were escorted to our desks to collect personal belongings and escorted off-site, made redundant on the spot. It seems our ex-colleague had managed to cause enough issues and blame his old colleagues that the client, his new boss, canceled our support contract. It took me 3 months to get a new job, and I had to work and live away from home during the week. A few months into this job, I saw the ex-colleague go into my manager's office. I wanted to punch him there and then, but I waited until he was leaving and made sure to pass him and throw a quick high punch as he was leaving. Pikachu Face describes it perfectly. After he left, I went into my manager's office and he confirmed he was interviewing him. I asked if he asked ex-colleague on why he left previous job. He said no. As it happens, I knew why ex-colleague was sacked not long after the rest of us were made redundant. taking his secretary away, on conferences or training courses that she had no business being at. So in the end, he wasn't offered a role at the company. In the end, I left the company after 6 months, so I could work closer and be home every night. But will always be grateful to that company for giving me the opportunity to get one, over a guy who had got me made redundant. Since I cost him financial hardship for a while longer as he didn't get the job, I am not sure how petty this was, but made me happy anyway. So I talked with this guy for a few minutes. It was going great, and we talked about hooking up. He lived an hour away from me. Neither one of us had a car, but that didn't stop me. I spent $100 on a lift to his place. While on the way there, we're texting and he's going on and on about something that didn't make sense. Something about exes and all that, I don't know. I'm halfway there when we stop texting, and the voice inside my head telling me to go back. But I didn't want to, since I was in too deep. And it was $100. So I got there, step out of the car, and as soon as I see a Trump flag, my phone dies. I'm a bit worried. It wasn't his house, thankfully. He's looking for me while standing in a church parking lot, and I begrudgingly go over to him to introduce myself. Then we walk to his house, and I found out he's got company. She was a nice lady, but it honestly took her a long time to leave with one of the cuddle-bug dogs. That dog was the second best thing to happen that night. Let me give you bullet points as to why he was horrible, so I don't have to drag this on forever. He is 5'6" and 300 pounds, but he mentioned that he wasn't doing anything for his health. Big turn off! Sure, you could tell he was big with his clothes on. I thought he was exaggerating, because some gay men hate themselves and, well, they talk mad shit about themselves. Also, he came on my foot and moaned like a female porn star. As he was painting his bedroom wall, because that must be his normal post-sex activity, I guess, he would talk about his exes. 2 of them were his cousins. He had sex the first time he met one of the boyfriends, and told me that when he put his head on his chest, he told him that he loved him. No, I'm not the crazy one here. I didn't think he was in love with me and wanted to pull a Kathy Bates from Misery, so I wouldn't leave. Of course not. When we went back to the living room, so I could get dressed and he could take a shower, he mentioned that the house is infested with termites. Checks out since there's a fucking Ouija board casually hanging on the wall. My phone had been on the charger for an hour at this point. The damn thing barely worked, and I had 5% on it. I'm trying desperately to text a friend for help. To no avail due to shit connection. While I'm trying to and begging the universe to give me a fucking lift so I can escape right away. Luckily, I got a good enough connection to have a ride 3 minutes away. This guy, oh so slowly but surely gets to taking a shower. He wanted me to give him head and wouldn't close the bathroom door until I say that he'll have to find how good my blowjobs are. Then he closes the door, turns on his jazz music, and starts the shower. I dip the fuck out and I get to my lift. A few minutes later, my phone dies. That's okay, because I'm safe and on my way home. He texted me the next morning, but I blocked and deleted his number. Bye. About 3 years ago, my 15-year-old son wanted to join martial arts just for some fun, and I didn't think much of it. I just sent him to do it twice a week. He quite enjoyed it. He was learning all the moves and got quite good at it, almost reaching the top belt. But this is also when I had a drinking problem and would get angry really easily over the smallest things. Sometimes I would even break things around the house like crazy. One day, my younger son, who was 12 years old, came home. While I happened to have a few drinks beforehand, I wasn't in the best mood at all, so when he came to say hi to me, I just yelled at him, which scared him off. My wife was just in shock and told me to go apologize to him in his room. I went into his room just to yell at him again, and he was screaming back at me, which made me even more angry. My wife was so worried to say anything, because I was so angry. Anyways, while this was happening, my oldest son came home to saw my wife crying. Then he asked what happened, and she told him the whole thing. So he rushed to the room and pushed me out of the way to protect. His brother and I happened to throw a punch at him, and he blocked it. So I would throw another 4 punches, only for him to block them again and again. After that, he kicked both of my ribs so hard that I fell over. My son used his martial arts to protect his brother and himself. I'm glad he took that class because after I fell, it hit me that I shouldn't be drinking anymore. Because I realized what I had done and glad my son fought me because otherwise I would have been in jail. After all of this, I quit my drink habit, and my son still continues his martial arts. I even enrolled his little brother too.
I was returning home from a trip on a small puddle jumper 20-seat plane. Coming home from a research trip when I was in graduate school. I was coming home from an event where we were teaching local urban community leaders to do HIV and AIDS education prevention in non-traditional urban settings. I had with me some of the leftover bags that we gave the program participants, which included educational materials such as little handheld, vibrators, among other things, like dental dams, condoms, and stuffs. Well, due to the bumpiness of the flight, several of the bags opened up and 4 vibrators, condoms galore, and bottles of lube went flying down the aisle from my seat. What a show! That really took a little explaining.
I'm 33 years old and have a pretty big age difference with my brother, who is 44. He had a child at 25, which means that I became an uncle at 14. Because we were pretty close in age, I formed a special bond with my niece, Ella. When she was 16, my brother and his family moved away, so I've been seeing them less recently, but we keep in touch and catch up at family events. 2 years later, on Christmas, Ella told me that she had a boyfriend and told me a bit about him. He was invited for Easter and other events, but was never able to make it. When we were planning our mom's birthday, my brother decided to invite Ella's boyfriend so that we could all meet him. Yesterday was the birthday. I was looking forward to meeting Ella's boyfriend, Mark, but I so very confused when I saw her walk in with a man that looked double her age. She introduced him to me and I politely smiled, but was deep down actually very concerned. I asked my brother how old Mark was, and he told me that Mark is 36. Ella had told me that he was a bit older, but I assumed like early or mid-20s, not almost 40. That's when they called us in the living room to share exciting news. Ella showed us a ring and revealed that they were engaged. I spontaneously said, "What the fuck?" And everyone looked at me like I was crazy. I told them that they were out of their minds if they thought this was normal. There was no world in which a 30-year-old should date an 18, and that she shouldn't be getting married. All of them accused me of ruining Ella's happiness. Some even said that I was jealous of Mark, which is so fucking disgusting I can't even explain it. I mean, I'm younger than Mark, but never in a million years would I ever consider dating someone younger than 25. They told me that if they were happy, that's all that matters, and it was perfectly legal as they were both adults, which isn't true, because they've been dating for a year and Ella only turned 18 7 months ago. I told them that they were sick for allowing this, and that he was a predator, but nigh one wouldn't listen. I know this isn't my business, but I can't help but fear for my niece. She is young and doesn't really know what she's getting into. I'm really scared of her getting married and being unable to leave him when she realizes how sick it was. I just left and slammed the door, and have been receiving pretty wild messages and calls since then. I don't know if I was just overreacting, or if I wasn't wrong. I don't know what I can do to make them realize how wrong it is.
My husband and I have been together since we were 16 years old, while my father-in-law and his wife have been together for about 10 years. We live in the South, and politics can be a sore subject. My husband and I are Democrat liberal leaning. My in-laws are boomer Southern conservatives. Earlier this year, we welcomed our first child, which also their first grandchild. They would come over about twice a week to visit the baby. During their last visit, my father-in-law makes a comment that women are only in places of management because they have to be put there, that the woke movement has made it. Women check a diversity box, so they are selected for management even though men historically perform better in those roles. My husband and I told him not to say things like that because it's wrong. And it was very rude to say since he knows I was promoted to a management position when I returned from maternity leave. For some reason, us challenging him really set off his wife. Then my mother-in-law goes on to tell me to shut up and says I sound like a moron. We calmly ask her to apologize, and we say that we think the visit needs to be over. She refuses to apologize and refuses to leave because she hasn't held the baby yet. We tell her if she can't apologize, then she needs to leave. They both storm out of the house, and on their way out, she calls my husband pussy-whipped and calls me a bitch. It has been months, and they have still not apologized. We have tried to initiate that conversation, and they were not having it. They told us that is the problem with us liberals. We don't respect that people have different opinions, and we are willing to destroy families over it. In their mind, since they are his parents, There is no need to apologize, so we need to just get over it. After the altercation, we both agreed. We would not allow them around our child until they sincerely apologize. If you cannot respect the parents, you don't get to have a relationship with the child. If my husband wants to see his dad, that's totally fine, but not the baby. I know that it sounds crazy to cut his dad out of his and our child's life forever. That's why we tried to initiate the conversation. Now the holidays are coming, I can tell my husband is getting anxious. I know he is disappointed his dad is going to be missing out on his grandchild's first Christmas. But I don't want them around. Even if they were to apologize now, I know it would only be to get to see the baby for the holidays. This is our first holiday season as parents. Our baby won't remember anything, but we will. We only get a few that they won't remember. Those are for us as parents. I don't want to share that time with people who speak to us so rudely in our own home.
There's a rental house across the street from my home that recently had some terrible neighbors who got evicted. Well, lightning struck twice. Even worse, neighbors moved in. A month ago, a new family moved into that house. This house had previously been occupied by 3 families who had a crew of kids and a basketball hoop that resulted in over $7,000 worth of damage to my vehicles and a case pending in small claims court from the kids, jumping on them and climbing on them. They were not evicted until I filed a lawsuit against their landlord about non-compliance, without contact and no trespassing order. However, the new family seemed nice enough. It was a husband, a wife, and their 2 boys' ages, 6 and 12. It was refreshing to not have the ragtag crew living across the street from us. For the first time in 4 years, every morning, the kids walked to the bus stop with the mom and the husband would go to work. Nothing at all seemed out of the ordinary whatsoever. Until a week ago, the oldest son was out in his driveway with his little scooter doing tricks, while I was taking my dogs out of the house to go for a walk. When he ran over to my driveway, I thought that he was only wanting to pet my dogs, but instead he started kicking them extremely hard in the side. My older of the 2 dogs started yelping, and at that point, I yelled at him to stop and pulled my dogs back into the house. I ran across the street and started knocking on the door to his house, and all I could see is that dummy kid making faces and flicking me off through the front bay windows. My wife, who was home at the time, noticed our older dog limping and not putting weight down on his back leg, and had some red marks on their side through the fur. So my wife rushed them to the emergency vet for evaluation. I closed the door and locked the house up and called the cops. Both of the family vehicles were in the driveway, making me think that everyone was home. But they knew their kid screwed up and they were avoiding me. I checked our CCTV footage that showed the boy running over and start kicking my dogs unprovoked. Being a small town, the police arrived very quickly. They took my statement and I showed them the footage. They asked if I had any prior interactions with the child, and I said no. The police officer was rather nervous. He asked if the boy was a special needs, which I was unaware of. He then called a family law unit in before he went to talk to the family across the street. When the other unit arrived, it wasn't more than a minute later that I heard a call on the radio for an ambulance. Come to find out, both parents were in the bedroom, coming down off of heroin and let the kids run wild. The parents were taken away in an ambulance for evaluation, and their children were removed from the house by child services. My older dog suffered from blunt force trauma to the leg, and my younger dog had a giant bruise on the side. Luckily, they weren't injured any worse by the boy kicking them. So today, I'm coming home from work and I see the parents for the first time in a week since this happened. The husband comes over, which I'm expecting him to apologize, but he says, "What you did was fucked up, man. My kid didn't hurt your dog. And if I ever see you walking those things, I'll make sure they're actually hurt next time. You'll be hearing from our lawyer." I didn't say a word to that man, but my dog, who can barely walk, now begs to differ on his opinion that his son didn't hurt him. Thankfully, we have pet insurance and only had to pay the deductible of the $1,400 bill. I told the officer who took my statement and had been working the case of what happened, and there's a police vehicle over at the house right now. The man was arrested again for criminal threats, and there's civil protection order in place. The officer said there's a very low possibility he will be coming back to this address after the way booking went. I also got a call from the police department early this morning that his wife was arrested last night at the police station after they took the husband in. They're getting arraigned today on the child neglect and drug charges, but are pending for their criminal threats and assault on an officer charges. They're going to get a subpoena for me to appear in court on that case if it is filed.
I'm visiting my boomer father from out of state. We are sitting around the dinner table with the rest of my family talking. By the way, my parents split when I was 13. They have both remarried. But my father absolutely cannot let it go, and still shits all over my mom to this day. Also, he recently developed this weird sense of accomplishment, and brags that you have to raise kids to be insecure. Because in his mind, the only way for someone to think of other people is to guilt them into it. So they learn to guilt themselves, and he's actively boasting his successes in raising kids to be insecure. So one day I flatly say, except that it turned me into a doormat. I saw the approval of other people so badly that I just let anyone use me, especially as a teenager. My father sees this as an opportunity to trash my mom and says, "Yeah, your brother told me you used to sneak boys over to your mom's at night. That would have never happened if I had gotten sole custody of you instead of your mom." Then, I respond, "Actually, it probably would have happened a lot more. In fact, the very first time it happened was here. Let me tell you." The shock on his face was freaking priceless. He was almost too dumbfounded to ask, "What?" I tell him, "Yeah, I used to take my window screen out and have them climb through the bedroom window." Then, his jaw is on the table. So I deliver the final blow. Oh, and by the way, I was 15 the first time, he was 20. So he was a man, not a boy. That tends to happen when you are so insecure that you'll do anything for approval. And that's when his brain broke. I have never seen him back away from a conversation so quickly. He had no clue how to respond that. So he just changed the topic. If you were to ask him about that conversation now, I'm 100% sure he has wiped it from his memory. His small mind cannot fathom it. So I am not surprised when he acts like it never happened. He still brags about raising kids to be insecure. But honestly, having that lasting image of the shock on his face, that's all I need.
A few years ago, before caller ID was available, I was working in a company that made super fast modems. These were very expensive, and our customers were all large corporations and organizations who always wanted the highest speeds available. There was one customer with serious anger issues, always called and yelling his lungs out whenever he encountered a problem. Customers were always assigned to specific engineers, so poor old Ted had to deal with him every time. So one day, over lunch, I asked him if he'd heard from Major Decibels, our nickname for the asshole, and he started laughing. Turns out he'd programmed one of his own test modems to call the guys home. Number at 2, 3, and 4 a.m. every night. Decibels answered the phone to the annoying squeal of a modem trying to handshake. Ted even reduced the connection speed to the standard at the time, so the victim wouldn't recognize our products. Quite distinctive handshake sounds. Decibels' guy was on 24 hours call, which Ted knew, so unplugging the phone wasn't an option. This went on for about a month until the guy changed his number. I was in total awe of this calculated vengeance.
So, I've been on dating apps for a bit, and recently met the first woman I've vibed hard earlier this week. Oh my god, she is just the sweetest thing. I become such a dork around her. She asked where we should get drinks, and I said Starbucks when she was clearly talking about alcohol. I'm literally just stupid for this cool girl, y'all. Her hair is so silky blonde and she's so tall. She's about 6'4", and the way she bent over to kiss me was just so sweet. We ended up at her place to watch DVD on her PS2, which is so fucking cool. I mean, seriously. She's on another level of cool stoner girl you meet at a party once, and wish to meet again. But I'm just meeting her again too soon. We cuddled and watched some movies. I felt so safe with her, and her mouth just melted into mine so well. Even when she was rough, it felt nice. She bit into my neck and I have not moaned that loud in ages. She was so nice the whole time and complimented me so much. The aftercare of our spicy dealings was just us calling each other beautiful and cute, over and over again. I swear, I'm so down bad for this hottie.
My parents went out last weekend, and I took the chance to work on my full body tan as the weather was great. I put some music on, got comfortable on a towel on the grass, and spread out. The combination of breeze on my bare skin, warm from the sun, and music got me so relaxed. I just completely fell asleep. Then my parents came home, and I didn't hear them. As I woke up, my parents were also in the backyard. Mom was sitting near me on a chair, just reading a book, and Dad was sleeping on the outdoor lounge all the while I was lying there, all naked, wide open for all to see. I instantly got a huge fright and ran inside. But what made it worse was that my mom followed me inside and tried to tell me that a lot of people are naked at home. It shouldn't be a problem among family, and they have seen me naked so many times as a kid that it doesn't matter anymore. All the while I was just trying to hide in my room and pretend it never happened.
My parents went out last weekend, and I took the chance to work on my full body tan as the weather was great. I put some music on, got comfortable on a towel on the grass, and spread out. The combination of breeze on my bare skin, Warmth from the sun and music got me so relaxed. I just completely fell asleep. Then my parents came home, and I didn't hear them. As I woke up, my parents were also in the backyard. Mom was sitting near me on a chair, just reading a book, and Dad was sleeping on the outdoor lounge all the while I was lying there, all naked, wide open for all to see. I instantly got a huge fright and ran inside. But what made it worse was that my mom followed me inside and tried to tell me that a lot of people are naked at home. It shouldn't be a problem among family, and they have seen me naked so many times as a kid that it doesn't matter anymore. All the while I was just trying to hide in my room and pretend it never happened.
I drive home from band practice. It was a good practice, and I was in a really good mood. I get home and start changing clothes to go to bed. And suddenly my dog needs to go out to pee. So I open the back door and let him out. Then I decide I'll step out there with him in my underwear. All the lights were off, so no one can see me. As soon as I shut the door to wait my dog, I realized the doorknob was locked. Now, here I am, standing in my backyard in the dark at 11:30 p.m. in nothing but my underwear. And I'm locked out of my house. I have no keys, no phone, no smartwatch, no way to contact anybody. And my dog is stuck out there with me. I had to hop in 8 feet, fence to get to the front yard. First of all, that hurt. After that, I went to my truck hoping I left it unlocked, so I could get into the garage. But the truck was locked, ouch. I had to take an LSU flag and cover myself like a crazy person, walk across the street quite literally in my drawers, and go knock on my neighbor's door for help. Actually, I have never met this neighbor before, and his first interaction with me ever was tonight, with me standing on his porch in my underwear. Thankfully, a locksmith came rather quickly and was able to get me back in my house. It sucked that I had to spend money to unlock my own door, but I could have been a lot worse. I've worked in software company for the bulk of my career. 10 years ago, my company was hosting its annual user conference in Las Vegas as a software sales guy. I had carte blanche on expenses as long as it involved clients. Expensive dinners, drinks, tables at clubs, etc. The only unbreakable rule was we couldn't pay for strippers. Having been in the industry long enough, I realized what guys would do to get around this. It was common for them to explain to a manager at a strip club, and then they would have the girls' tips added to the bottle service. Even with that in place, I never thought it was a good idea to play that game. Nor did I think it was a good idea to go to a strip club with clients. Then, there was Jim, a fellow sales at the typical sleazy guy. He would tell half-truths to prospects, overcharge, and oversell them. The type that creates a hassle for the services and implementation teams. But he still got paid, so he didn't care. When he got to Vegas, Jim would go crazy entertaining clients and himself. Sometimes he would go to dinner by himself. But say some senior was with him, and he also abused the stripper loophole. One of the reasons he tried to get a group to the strip club each night was that he had a very conservative wife. His wife made the kids go to a Christian school, and the family went to church every Sunday. She hated the annual trips to Vegas. On the last night of the conference, he organized a shuttle from one of the big strip clubs to pick up a group. There were some open seats he was trying to fill to meet the minimum commitment for free entry to the club. Jim saw me speaking to a client and invited us, but I declined. He started mocking me about being scared of pretty ladies, or that I would probably nut the first time one of them touched me. This would have normally not bothered me, but he did it in front of my client. So I stated, I don't want to go because I don't think it's professional. He left. I bought my client another round and we joked about the Dow Shabak. Then I was on my own and decided to walk the strip a bit and head to bed early due to an early morning flight. If you've ever been to Vegas, there are people on the sidewalk handing out cards that are essentially ads for escorts. They legally can't speak to you, so they slap the cards on their hands to get your attention. After a few drinks, I started taking a few. Fast forward to the next morning, when Jim and I were sitting in the airport waiting for our flight. He had stayed out to 4 a.m. and was a complete mess and totally hungover. I was 100% sober and enjoying his condition. At one point, he went to the bathroom and asked me to watch his bag. When he was out of sight, I added those escort cards in his bag. When his wife went to do her laundry routine after he got home, she was not happy. She didn't believe in divorce. But they were suddenly going to church 3 times a week and had a weekly counseling session with their pastor. This also led to Jim dropping out of his weekly golf league. He was telling us all the story at the office looking for sympathy, and he swore he never took those cards. Well, I really enjoyed his stupid panic face.
My wife Emily and I have been married for 7 years with 2 kids. We've had an unconventional but incredible relationship that includes her college best friend, Sarah. What started as a drunken threesome during spring break evolved into an amazing dynamic between the 3 of us. Sarah has been like a second mom to our kids. She's there for every birthday and even helps with nighttime routines when she stays over. The kids adore their Aunt Sarah. She's independent, successful, and has never wanted to settle down. But lately, she's been talking about wanting a baby. A few days ago, after we put the kids to bed, 3 of us were hang out and have some drinks. Suddenly, Emily said something that's been keeping me up. What if Mark was your donor? She said to Sarah. I nearly choked on my drink. But as the conversation developed, it was clear this wasn't just a passing thought. They'd been discussing it for weeks. Sarah has been researching sperm banks, but feels uncomfortable with the idea of an anonymous donor. And Emily thinks it's perfect that Sarah gets a baby from someone she knows and trusts. And our children would have a half-sibling they already love. Also, they don't want to do it through a clinic. They want to do it naturally because of our existing dynamic. Emily says it would be more meaningful, more intimate. Sarah blushed when she agreed, saying she'd prefer it this way too. What's fucking with my head is how excited Emily gets talking about it. She can't hide the excitement at the idea of me getting her best friend pregnant, just like she was when we were trying for our kids. Sarah keeps giving me these shy looks that drive me crazy, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to the idea. I'm seriously considering it. The thought of having another child, this time with Sarah, with Emily's blessing and enthusiasm, is starting to feel right in a way I never expected. My wife already talking about how our kids would love having a little brother or sister at Aunt Sarah's house. She's planning play dates and family vacations. Like it's the most natural thing in the world.